Good morning. According to a graph from Forbes, a global media company, it says that Palestine had over 30,000 casualties as a result of the battles and attacks that happened during the Palestinian-Israeli conflict only 5 years ago in 2018 itself. In this recent picture taken by AFP photographer Ahmad Garabli from the New York Times, it shows the Palestinian local citizens protesting against Israel because of their annexation to one area. This protest is evidence of the influx of the Jewish in Israel after the seizure of power and government. In this recent picture, also taken from the New York Times, it shows the outcome of an airstrike bomb attack that took place in Gaza City on May 11, 2021. This bombing from the Jewish Israelis against the Muslim Palestinians annihilates the core of the battle, since it destroys the sacred religious land that each side wants to take and is claiming and protecting for themselves. As seen in the images, any of the solutions they tried are not good enough or satisfactory for the people of Palestine and Israel because of the wide distribution of the land. The solution we came up with is called the two-state solution and could be the possible answer to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Is it really worth all the damage? My name is Quinn.
I'm Connor Jackson.
I'm Nelson Quintero.
I'm David Hume.
I'm Pedro Pessoa. Did faith and religion positively or negatively impact the concept of equality in the Israeli and Palestinian conflict along with its people? Faith and religion had a negative impact on the concept of equality, and that has led the Jews to having much more influence in Israel than Muslims. As you can see in this map by BBC, we have this yellow area as known as Israel, right by the Mediterranean Sea, and over here, just for some context, we have Gaza, Jerusalem, and West Bank. Up top here in our timeline, we have Foundation of Israel, right under 1946. 1946, after World War II ended in 1945, Jewish people were still scared and felt unsafe. Israel was founded by the British as a country, and it was a place where Jews could live with peace without having the fear of the Holocaust happening again. Following that, 1967, two countries had different religions, and that's what brought the argument. Most Arab countries were mad at Israel because they were trying to take their land that used to belong to them. And when the Arab countries attacked, Israel took a lot of territory. Israel gave most of it back, but they still kept Gaza and the West Bank, which are now Palestine. Under that, we have 1993, which is the Oslo Peace Treaty. Israel and Palestine signed the Oslo Peace Treaty, which means that they recognize each other as countries. But they still did not assign boundaries, so the conflict still kept going and did not really fix anything. Following, we have 1997, which is the construction in Palestine. Israel starts building for its people in Palestine, even though when they signed the Oslo Peace Treaty, they promised not to do any constructions there. This makes Palestinians angry and says Israeli did not keep their promise. Here we have 2000s, where Israeli attacks. Two Israelis wandered into the Palestinians' land and they were instantly killed by the mob. Israel blames Palestinian rulers and attacked places in West Bank and Gaza and completely destroys the police where the Israelis were killed using helicopters. Almost done, we have 2002 suicide bombing. Two suicide bombings killed over 24 Israelis in Jerusalem. Israel blames on the Palestinians and starts to take over land in West Bank and Gaza. Again, and left the land because of the Oslo Treaty. Last but not least, we have 2012. The conflict has still been going on for years now. Palestine wants to become a full member of the UN and become a country, but the US and Israel are against them becoming their own country. To the next one.
Next one. There has been an influx of Jews migrating over into Israel. As a result, Jews are starting to dominate over the Muslims in government powers and having more possession in land of Israel, giving unfair advantages to land that wasn't theirs at the moment. Now they have more lawmaking powers, and as Quinn stated before, they have the ability to put them in annexation. Not forgetting the fact that this leads to the Jews having a strong stronger and fuller religious group from their numbers, inclining the Jews to see the importance of historic Palestine with Jerusalem, which is why the Israelis are enforcing everything possible to get rid of the Muslims. Now the Jews are destroying the place they are trying to gain, making more difficulties since the area is equally important to both sides. As I stated before, the Muslims are in control of Jerusalem, which is creating conflicts, destroying what is left of historic Palestine, and making unfair living environment that can't satisfy sustaining the Palestinians and Muslims, which is leading to protests, destroying everything with an outcome of neither side having the place to call their home. As this graph shows, the Palestinians are the damages that the Palestinians have taken during only the conflict. As it shows here, the Palestinians have taken 5,590 deaths, while the Israelis have only taken 5% of the damage, which is 251 deaths.
This graph by Ben Zion and EBSCO shows the unemployment rate from 1961 to 1972, where it was at its peak in 1967, where violence was also at its peak, which caused people to not go out and get jobs, and people were scared to leave their own homes, which is like what Nelson said about the violence being caused in Israel. Another reason this happened was because of the population influx from Jewish immigrants. This also caused many jobs to be fought over and hatred between the two sides, blaming for not having jobs. This next graph shows the GDP rate from 1961 to 1972, where it was at its lowest rate from 1966 to 1967. This shows that the households were not able to get the right supplies they needed, which caused even more hatred between the two sides and a deep reason for conflict.
In 1947, the UN Partition Plan was approved and proposed to the leaders of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Jewish accepted the partition plan, while the Arabs rejected it on the grounds that the distribution was favored towards the Jewish. In the partition plan, one-third of Israel is designated to the Arab minority, while two-thirds is designated towards the Jewish majority. The city of Jerusalem would be inhabitable by both the Arabs and Jewish. The plan failed due to two main reasons. One, the Jewish would own most of the best agricultural land, and two, the Jewish would receive 2 times the amount of land the Arabs would receive. This map of Palestine shows how the area would be split by the UN partition plan, and Jerusalem is shown in pink and is surrounded by the orange area, which is inhabited by the Arabs. The green area is inhabited by the Jewish. Jerusalem would be accessible to the Jewish through roads running from Jewish territory into Jerusalem. As said before by Quinn, the two-state solution is the possible answer to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The two-state solution has many of the same aspects as the UN partition plan, except that the UN partition plan, except that the distribution of land is fair to both sides. Half of the land and resources go to each group. To solve the problem of the families being split apart, the people would be provided dual citizenship in both the new states. The two-state solution is not perfect and has many possible problems. First, the funding needed to move everyone and to implement the borders is immense. After all the money spent on the damages, there may not be enough money to finance the relocation of all the citizens. Second, the two-state solution might still leave people dissatisfied with the distribution of land and resources. The individual needs of the people will most likely not be met and might lead to even more protests for the border to be moved further. And lastly, fighting might still continue at the borders. The two-state solution only separates the two sides from each other. It doesn't stop the fighting altogether. Thank you.
All right, Connor, we'll start with you and then we'll just go across. Connor, if there was a sixth member of your team, what's a perspective that they could have used that would have aided in us understanding this presentation?
Another perspective that we could probably use would be probably territories, because the territories were a huge reason that they were fighting and the population really shifted, and it would show easier on how the economy was affected in certain areas as well.
All right, thank you. Pedro, describe an argument from one of your peers' research that they did that makes you think differently about the solution that you came up with, the two-state solution you came up with.
Well, as Connor mentioned, or as his perspective was showing, we had historical events, and as shown in the timeline by the Millennia magazine, and that really helped us understand better what happened when, and it really gave us a good context to make the solution and help Damon with the two-stage solution and bring everything together, and it really ties everything together.
Thank you. All right, Damon. What is a way in which your team's solution makes you think differently about the research you conducted?
Well, can you repeat the question?
Sure. What's a way in which the solution that you guys came up with made you think differently about the research that you specifically conducted?
Well, the solution the solution like connected the one more time. Can you repeat?
The solution that you guys came up with, how did your research impact that? Like, what's the relationship between those two things?
My research showed like help make the solution by one more time.
What's a way in which your team's solution makes you think differently about the research you conducted?
Oh, the solution, the two-state solution, it helped my thinking by, it really, I'm not sure.
Okay. Nelson, what's an example of an argument from one of your peers' reports that you didn't use, and then why didn't you use it?
Okay, so as Connor once stated that since the conflicts had affected the Palestinians, that the Israelis were the ones that were actually that were at a disadvantage, since the Muslims were in control. But in our perspective, it didn't really make any sense to the conflict, since the Muslims were the one that were on the defensive, since they're the ones trying to be taken over.
Okay. And then last one. Reflecting on the work from your colleagues, which one had the greatest impact of your understanding of the issue?
I'd say Damien had it because he talked about how the war would relate to the Indo-Pakistan war, which when I was talking about the conflicts was similar to theirs, but something that he said was how since this war is different from theirs, because it's completely different completely different circumstances, because it's in a different area. I'd say that's what helped me the most.